The moment the sunlight touched my face, everything shifted. 1 second I was in my body. Then suddenly, I wasn't. I found myself somewhere completely different. I was standing in the most breathtaking garden I could ever imagine, alive with light, glowing like a soft golden rainbow. The love I felt there, it wrapped around me. It wasn't like love here. It was deeper, total, unshakable. And then I saw them. My guides, Gail, Jessica and Peter. They were familiar, like old friends I'd somehow always known. I walked straight to them, without hesitation. Not everyone meets their guides in this life, but they're always there. I need you to know that. You're never alone. Even if you can't see them, feel them, or name them, your guides are with you. We all have them. Every single person on this planet is supported by something greater, something loving. My near-death experience happened on Christmas 2021. Before that, I was a wife, a mom, and for years I worked in mental health and addiction. But in 2015, I embraced something more. My abilities as a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, a healer, and an animal communicator. And that changed everything. I've always felt like I came into this world a little different. As a toddler, I wasn't your typical 3-year-old. I carried the energy of someone much older, like I'd already lived lifetimes. I was quiet, observant, and saw things that others didn't. At the time, I didn't realize that not everyone could see the extra people in the room. I just assumed adults were ignoring them, which confused me. Growing up, I stayed a bit on the fringe. I created a life that gave me freedom. I set my own hours, took summers off for my kids, and always carved out December. I'm obsessed with Christmas, even though the season hasn't always been kind to me. Still, I go all in. Lights, music, food, people. It's how I pour love into the world. By December 2021, after years of lockdowns and isolation, I was thrilled. That Christmas was going to be special. The first time I could finally host again. I planned a big Christmas Eve gathering like I used to, with 40 loved ones. We kicked things off early, decorating gingerbread houses with my kids, foster kids, and my husband. It was perfect. Then came December 23rd, and everything changed. That night, something felt off, but I didn't think much of it at first. We'd had such a beautiful day, full of laughter, sugar, and tradition. But by evening, a crushing headache hit me out of nowhere. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before, so intense I couldn't see straight. I told my family I needed to lie down. I thought some rest would fix it. Later, I sent a quick text to my husband. "Can you bring me some Tylenol and Advil?" They were still out in the living room, watching a movie. He brought the meds, and I took them, thinking I'd sleep it off. But I never really fell asleep. I lost consciousness. Doctors believe the stroke began around 11:30 p.m. I wouldn't open my eyes again until nearly 5 a.m. When I did, everything had changed. I couldn't move the right side of my body. I couldn't speak. My mind was awake, but my body had gone silent. I tried to stand, not realizing I was paralyzed, and collapsed to the floor. I couldn't crawl, couldn't scream. My phone was just out of reach, and the darkness felt endless. Desperate, I flung myself toward the wall and hit it. Hard. The sound must have echoed through the house, because it woke my husband and my mum, who lived in our basement suite. My husband rushed in. The second he saw me, he knew it was a stroke. His first aid training kicked in. He called 911. At the hospital, it was clear the damage had already been done. The stroke had hit my midbrain. Our small-town hospital wasn't equipped for the kind of neurosurgery I needed. The only chance I had was to be flown by life flight to a larger hospital hours away. That's when things got real. The doctors told my family, my kids, who were just 12 and 14 at the time, to say their goodbyes. The odds weren't in my favor. They said I probably wouldn't survive the flight. I remember being strapped into the helicopter, my husband beside me. The rotor blades were loud, and the cabin was cold. I had a fever, common apparently when your body is nearing death. And then the sunlight hit my face. In that moment, everything changed. My husband reached out to shield my eyes from the light, but it was too late. The second that sun touched my skin, I was no longer in my body. I was somewhere else. I could see everything, my body still strapped in the helicopter, my husband beside me. But then my vision expanded. I saw my children driving toward our house. I saw my sisters. I saw it all from above, with complete clarity. There was no fear, only stillness and love. That was the moment I crossed over. And it was just the beginning. I was aware the whole time. I could see everything, my body, my husband beside me in the helicopter. But I wasn't in my body anymore. I hadn't died in the way people often describe. There was no tunnel, no blinding light pulling me in. It was as if I simply opened my eyes and I was somewhere else entirely. What I saw took my breath away. I stood barefoot in a garden so beautiful no place on earth could compare. The grass beneath me was soft and alive, vibrating almost. Colors pulsed with energy. Flowers bloomed in impossible shapes and shades. There was a small pond reflecting light like liquid crystal, and a gentle stream ran beneath a gazebo in the distance. The air was warm, but not hot. Perfect, like everything had been designed with love in its purest form. I looked down and saw I was wearing a white dress, not one I owned, but one that felt like it had always belonged to me. I felt peace, but not the sleepy kind. It was vibrant, conscious, and whole. Near the gazebo stood my spirit guides, beings I had worked with for years in my intuitive practice. They felt like home. And just beyond them I saw others, family members who had passed on, 2 of my grandparents, my mother-in-law, and even my dogs. Yes, even my dogs. One of them had already passed, but the other, who was still alive back on Earth, was there too. She was 17 and near the end of her journey, and she passed just days later while I was still in ICU. Somehow she was already walking between both worlds. I wasn't alone there. My husband and kids appeared as well, not as spirits, but more like echoes of them. It was as if the universe was showing me what I needed to see to decide whether I was ready to go or stay. And I knew instantly, if my leaving meant my kids would be lost in grief, I would come back. No matter the pain, no matter the odds. I needed to know they'd be okay. And then I saw something even more profound. To the right, stretching out across a glowing field, was a vast gathering of people. Every race, every gender, every era. I didn't recognize them from this life, but I knew them. These were all versions of me, past lives, future ones, parallel experiences. It was overwhelming but deeply comforting. It showed me just how interconnected we are, not just across timelines, but through the shared journey of our collective soul. Time didn't work the same way there. I felt like I was in that garden for decades. Every sensation was heightened. The texture of the grass, the light in the air, the emotion that pulsed through everything. but there were no words spoken. None were needed. Everything was shared telepathically. You thought it, and it was known. You felt it, and it was understood. I didn't need to run into my grandmother's arms, even though I missed her dearly. Her love was already surrounding me, just like the love that filled the entire space. It wasn't just around me. It was me. And yet, even as I stood in this paradise, part of me remained tuned into Earth. I could feel the chaos in the hospital room, the heartbreak of my family. I saw my sister, panicked and desperate, racing home from the hospital, stressed, bargaining with God, and needing to find a bathroom because her body was reacting to the trauma the way it always does. It was painful to witness, but it also grounded me. It reminded me why I had to come back. And in that moment, I knew. I had a choice to make. My sister didn't even stop on the drive home. She just needed to get back, to pack a bag, to prepare herself. It was Christmas Eve the next day, and she has young kids, but none of that felt real anymore. The joy of the season was buried under panic, confusion, and a kind of quiet heartbreak that doesn't always come with tears. Because when people are in shock, sometimes they just freeze. Everyone was scared. Everyone was bargaining. If she lives, I'll never take another moment for granted. If she wakes up, I'll make everything right. These desperate whispers filled the space between phone calls, hospital hallways, and living rooms. And even though I wasn't there physically, I felt it all. I saw my husband next to my unconscious body, terrified. He hates helicopters. He's always been uneasy in the air. And the stormy weather that night didn't help. But beyond the fear of flying, he was holding on to hope, even when the doctors weren't. He doesn't have a medical background, so in his mind, this was going to be okay. He just decided it had to be. Meanwhile, I was somewhere entirely different. It was peaceful. Beyond peaceful, it was home. I was being given the rarest gift: time. Time to choose. Time to understand. And the clarity in that space was unlike anything I've ever known. There were no questions like we have here. No, why did that happen? Or who is that? Or what does it mean? On the other side, you just know. Instantly, deeply, without doubt. Every connection, every truth, every lifetime, it all clicks into place. One of the most profound parts of being there was standing in that radiant garden and seeing the group of people gathered across the field. At first, they looked like strangers, but I recognized them, not with my eyes, but with my soul. They were all me, my past lives, my other selves from different dimensions, different times. Some looked a little like me, most didn't. But it didn't matter. I remembered them. I remembered who I was in those lifetimes, the lessons I carried, and how it all led to this moment. It wasn't overwhelming. It was comforting. Like discovering that every version of me, no matter how far removed in time or form, had been part of a much bigger journey. And somehow, I also saw the ripple effects of my choices. What would unfold if I returned? And what would happen if I didn't? I could see my family's futures, the challenges they'd face, the strength they'd find. Nothing was hidden. It just was. I wish I could have held on to every detail forever. But we're not built that way. I call it human amnesia. Even now, so much of what I learned and experienced is fading. Like waking from a dream that once felt more real than waking life. That loss is hard, because honestly it was so much easier there. Coming back into a body that couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't eat. That was hard. There were moments I wanted to let go and return to that place of love and clarity. But I stayed. One of the biggest reasons I stayed: my guides. I've worked with them for years, Gail, Jessica, and Peter. Though Peter isn't his real name. His energy is part of a larger collective, and his true name is, well, it's not exactly pronounceable. So I call him Peter. It works for us. Because of my work as a psychic medium, I already had a relationship with them. I'd felt their presence. I'd received their messages. But in that garden I saw them. I hugged them. For the first time they had form. They stood beside me not just as invisible guides, but as beings I could touch, feel, and fully embrace. They didn't tell me what to do. That's not how it works. But they walked me through both paths. What would unfold if I stayed in that realm, and what would happen if I returned? They gave me clarity, not answers. They helped me remember my power to choose. Not everyone sees their guides during a near-death experience, and that's okay. Some people meet loved ones instead, or they just feel a presence. It's deeply personal, shaped by who we are and what we're ready to understand. I think we're shown what we need, not always what we expect. For me, seeing my guides felt like a full circle moment. I'd trusted them in my work for years, and now they were standing beside me, helping me make the biggest decision of my life. And I chose to come back, not because it was easier, but because love asked me to. Some people believe everything happens for a reason, that our lives are mapped out long before we are born. And honestly, I used to wrestle with that idea. But after my near-death experience, I started to see things differently. I now believe I was always meant to go to the other side, not to die, but to remember, to wake up, to come back with purpose. And yes, I did have a choice. It wasn't forced on me. There was no judgment, no fear, just unconditional love and a quiet knowing that whatever I chose, whether to stay in that realm or return to Earth, I would be supported. But they didn't sugarcoat it. My guides were gentle but honest. They showed me what returning would look like. They told me the next 18 months would be the hardest of my life, that I would feel regret, even anger. And they were right. At first I was glowing, still carrying the energy from the other side, but that high didn't last. Reality hit fast. I woke up in a hospital bed, paralyzed on one side, unable to speak. Tubes were everywhere. I couldn't eat. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I was trapped inside a broken body. And I remember thinking, how am I supposed to inspire people? How can I write, speak, teach, when I can't even talk? The visions I had on the other side, of helping others, sharing what I'd learned, felt impossible. The doctors didn't have much hope either. After I was airlifted, I had a grand mal seizure. Then more seizures. They stabilized me with meds, but the damage was done. The stroke had hit my midbrain and completed itself. I had received TPA, a strong blood thinner, which made emergency surgery extremely dangerous. A neurosurgeon told my husband that if he operated, I likely wouldn't survive. The damage was already significant. My husband, completely overwhelmed and alone with this decision, asked the surgeon a simple question. If it were your wife lying there, what would you do? And the doctor answered, I wouldn't do it. So my husband didn't. He chose to wait. The doctors told him this was it. This was how I would stay. Paralyzed, non-verbal, unable to care for myself. They talked about long-term care facilities. Nurses came and went, speaking about me like I was already gone. I couldn't respond, but I heard everything. They said I'd never eat again, never speak. I was blind in one eye. My brain couldn't process hunger or pain. And yet, by day 4, I stood up. I took steps, clumsy, robotic ones, but steps. Words began to form, not many, and not clearly. I spoke like a child, but I spoke. The feeding tube came out. I started eating. I used the bathroom. It was like my body was rebooting, moment by moment. When the doctors ran more tests, they couldn't believe what they saw. Even my vision came back. No explanation. I had been completely blind in one eye, gone, and now I could see. 6 weeks later, I returned for a follow-up appointment. I was walking slowly with a cane, but walking, talking, eating. The neurosurgeon called the ER staff to come upstairs. He said, "You remember that young woman who came in on Christmas? Come see her, she's walking." It was Christmas that made it all even harder. My stroke hit in the early hours of December 23rd. I was unconscious through the 24th. On Christmas Day, while I was in the neuro ICU, my husband, bless his heart, took the kids to Denny's for dinner, just like in the Santa Claus movie. It wasn't festive, it wasn't warm, but it was real. And they came to visit me, even though ICU visits were limited to just 15 minutes. That same day, the neurosurgeon passed by. I hadn't moved much or spoken much, but something in me shifted again. Maybe it was love, maybe it was will, maybe it was divine timing. But slowly, piece by piece, I started returning. And today, I'm still here. Doctors call me their miracle patient. It says so right at the top of my chart. They still don't understand how I survived, let alone recovered. But I know, I wasn't just brought back. I chose to come back. I saw what was waiting for me on the other side, but I returned, not because it was easy, but because love called me home. And I believe that's true for so many of us. We go through what feels like the end, only to realize it's the beginning. There was a moment in the hospital when someone asked my kids, "Have you tried singing to your mum?" Speech was gone, completely, but singing lives in a different part of the brain. And so they sang 2 Christmas songs, and somehow I sang with them. Not with words, not clearly, but something came through. For my kids, it was a miracle. For me, it was a spark of something I wasn't sure I'd ever feel again. But Christmas that year was put on hold. We celebrated in January, once I was finally home. I think the first video my family recorded of me walking was around the 27th or 28th. Yes, it was miraculous. But let me tell you, it didn't feel that way. Every step felt like dragging my soul through wet cement. Every word relearned was a mountain. It wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous. It was frustrating and humbling. I had to relearn how to speak, one painful syllable at a time. My therapist would say a word. I'd try to say it. I'd fail. They'd repeat it. I'd try again, 7, 8 times, until it stuck. And emotionally, I was like a child. I'd cry or laugh at the wrong moments. I felt everything too much. I was angry, overwhelmed, and for a long time, ashamed. There were dark days. The medication I had to take to prevent seizures came with a cruel side effect. Thoughts I didn't want. I never wanted to leave my family, but those thoughts weren't me. They were chemical. I told my family. I got help. I stayed open and honest through it all, because silence would have been far more dangerous. And as if recovering from a stroke wasn't enough, life piled on. I caught COVID, badly, then COVID pneumonia. I lost one dog in the hospital, then another in March. Every time I felt like I was catching my breath, something else would knock me down. My guides had warned me these 18 months would be brutal, And they were. I lost my driver's license, my independence, my sense of self. But inch by inch, things began to shift. Light started breaking through. My guides, quiet for months, began nudging me again. "Paint," they said. I laughed. "Paint? With this brain?" But they were serious. And eventually, I listened. Once I picked up a paintbrush, something inside me unlocked. I couldn't stop. I tried, in the best way I could, to recreate what I saw on the other side. The colors, the light, the overwhelming feeling of peace. My hand wasn't steady, and my brain was still healing, but something flowed through me, like memory and energy, mixed into one. And somehow, with every brushstroke, I felt more alive than I had since waking up in the hospital. Then came the invitations. People started reaching out, asking me to tell my story. And that was something I'd been told would happen. My guides had said, "You'll speak, you'll share, you'll help others feel less alone." At the time, I didn't believe them. I could barely form sentences. I couldn't even type a message without struggling. The thought of writing a book, let alone 3, as they told me, felt like a cruel joke. But it started happening. Bit by bit, things began aligning. And honestly, this world needs connection. We live in the most connected time in human history. Phones, social media, constant access. And yet we've never been more isolated. Everyone's talking, but few are really listening. And fewer still feel truly seen. So I share my story to remind people, you're never alone. Not truly. Even in your darkest hour, there's presence, there's purpose. The recovery hasn't been easy. I smile and laugh, and if you didn't know my history, you might not notice anything. But every day, I live with the reality that 25% of my brain is gone. Not damaged, gone. A piece of my physical self, just erased. I used to think the brain could regenerate, that it would slowly bounce back. But no one tells you that part of the brain dies during a stroke and leaves behind empty space, a hole that doesn't refill. And that hole? It makes you vulnerable to further strokes, to seizures, to fatigue you can't explain. But despite all that, things kept unfolding in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. I held on to faith, not the kind tied to religion, but something deeper. A knowing that if I chose to come back, if I chose this life, there had to be a reason. I had to believe there was meaning in the pain. Not just for me, but for my family. Because they lived this with me, my husband, my kids. Every struggle I had, they carried too. I used to feel like a misfit. Even surrounded by love, family, friends, community, I often felt like I didn't quite belong. Like I was floating just outside the edge of connection. But when I crossed over, I understood something profound. There wasn't a single second in my life when I'd ever truly been alone. Not one. Even in my loneliest moments, I was surrounded by love, by energy, by those who walk with us, even when we can't see them. That realization changed me. For most of my life, I kept my gifts quiet. I could see and sense things other people couldn't. Spirits, energy, emotion. It was always there, but for a long time, it felt out of control. I saw things, but didn't know how to interact with them. I didn't know how to protect myself or create boundaries. It wasn't until I accepted my abilities that things started to shift. My guides, Gail, Jessica, and Peter, not his real name, but what I call him, began showing up with intention. They no longer just hovered. They came with purpose. They helped me see that I could communicate clearly, with control, and with consent. In the beginning, it was overwhelming. I live in a smaller town, and early on, I'd feel the urge to deliver messages to strangers, cashiers, people at restaurants, you name it. But I had to learn boundaries. Just because I could pass on a message didn't mean I should. I had to balance the divine with the human and protect my peace. My gifts unfolded gradually. Mediumship came first, then psychic intuition, which I resisted the most because that was the one most misunderstood, especially in religious circles. I was still going to church when I accepted my gifts, and the word psychic triggered fear. It was considered taboo, a deception. But over time I found peace with who I am and how I connect. Then came the empathic sensitivity. I could feel people's souls more than their words. I'd sense what someone was really feeling, even when their mouth said something else. Not always helpful in relationships, by the way. Some people don't want you to know what they're hiding from themselves. Eventually, medical intuition emerged, then healing, and later, animal communication. It all became part of my daily life. Now, I operate with a kind of internal light switch. When I'm working, the switch turns on. My human self steps aside, and my guides step forward. It's not me doing the work. It's all of us together. Since the NDE, something changed in how I receive information. Before, I'd hear guidance and repeat it. Now it's direct transmission, telepathic, like it was on the other side. Their thoughts flow through me. I don't interpret. I just speak. It's clearer, more honest. And while I sometimes argue with my guides, especially when a message makes me uncomfortable, they always remind me, truth is love, even when it stretches us. And here's what I want everyone to know. You have guides too. You don't need to see them. You don't need to hear them. You don't even have to believe in them. But they're there, walking beside you, every moment of your life. Whether you call it God, Source, the universe, or simply your own higher self, it doesn't matter. You're never alone. I know some people won't believe my story, and that's okay. You don't have to believe that I crossed over, or that I had a choice, or that I came back with a mission. But here's what I can tell you. Everything my guides told me would happen has happened. Every message, every vision, every nudge. So maybe it wasn't just a dream, maybe it was real. Maybe love is bigger and more intelligent than we know. And even if someone doubts my experience, I hope they walk away with this truth. There is a purpose to everything. We are connected, deeply, infinitely. And as our collective consciousness grows, more people like me will begin stepping into their truth. Back in the 80s, being a psychic medium was practically unheard of. You'd call a 1-900 number and pay $2 a minute just to talk to someone who might or might not be real. But now, things are shifting. The world is changing. We're waking up, we're remembering, and maybe, just maybe, we're finally ready to believe that miracles aren't rare, they're part of who we are. So what does all of this mean? Why share something so personal, so vulnerable, so otherworldly? Because you matter. Because your life matters. Because even if you're sitting in a dark room right now, feeling forgotten, feeling like you've messed up too much or gone too far, you're not alone. You never have been. I came back from the other side with one truth echoing in every part of me. There is more love surrounding us than we can possibly imagine. Every breath, every tear, every hard choice, it's all seen, it's all held, and nothing is ever wasted. Not your pain, not your confusion, not your joy. It all counts. I now live every day knowing I'm here on purpose. And guess what? So are you. You don't need a near-death experience to start living like your life has meaning. You don't need to see angels or speak to guides to believe you're guided. You are, right now. Even if you feel like a mess, even if your life feels broken or too far gone, there's a light in you that nothing can put out. If this story touched something inside you, please don't keep it to yourself. Like this video so the algorithm knows it matters. Comment below and tell me, have you ever felt that you were being guided? Have you ever had a moment where you knew, deep down, you weren't alone? Share this with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep hearing stories that remind you of the unseen beauty and power behind this human life. I promise, I don't just show up here to talk. I show up to remind you of what your soul already knows. You are loved, you are guided, and you are never walking alone. I truly believe if you're watching this, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear this message today. And I pray from the deepest part of my soul that God blesses you with peace, with clarity, and with the strength to keep going. Whatever you're walking through right now, I hope you feel the warmth of something greater walking right beside you. Because miracles don't just happen to people like me, they happen to people like you. And if you let them in, they will. So don't forget, like, comment, share, and hit that subscribe button. More messages are coming, and I can't wait to walk this journey with you. From my heart to yours, thank you for being here. And may you always remember, you are never, ever alone.